Hello, friends. Welcome to this 44th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation Webinars, then Webinar Series in Progress, as shown here. All episodes of this and the Secret Teaching series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald, Secret Doctrine, or Secret Teachings. Okay, as is our habit, we'll start by checking in on HPB and Colonel Olcott's travels as described in old diary leaves. This month, the good Colonel and HPB are reunited in the southern mountain village of Utakamunda. So if we could get a reader, please.
Okay, I'll start. And please now excuse me for any words that I butcher. A visit to Chingleput finished up this part of the year's tour, and I went thence to Udakamund to rejoin my dear colleague HPB at the hospital home of Major General and Mrs. Morgan. The railway ends at Metapalayam at the foot of the Nilgiri Hills, and the traveler proceeds up the well-metalled mountain road in a horse tonga or two-wheeled mail cart drawn by a pair of galloping ponies. The ride up is simply charming, and passing through forests, by banks of flowers, and past swarms of lovely painted butterflies. The air grows cooler and cooler until midway one is obliged to stop at the rest house and change one's light tropical costume for heavy woolens and even put on a top coat. At almost every turn in the winding road, splendid panoramas of scenery present themselves to view, while one finds Udakamund a lovely village of picturesque houses spreading over the foot slopes of the grassy and forest-covered adjacent hills, the roads lined with the roses, the enclosures joyous with lilies, verbenas, heliotropes, and other floral smiles of God.
Okay, a reader, please.
Okay. Joe, can you?
Yes.
Thank you.
At the toll gate on the Kuna Road, HPB met me in company with our dear friend, Mrs. Morgan. My old chum seemed really overjoyed to see me and rattled on in her affectionate way, like one who greets a long-absent relative. She was looking well. The champagne-like mountain air set her blood to leaping through her body, and she was in the highest spirits about the civilities that were being shown her by some of the high officials and their families. She worked off some of her excitement that same night by keeping me up until 2 a.m. to read proofs and correct her MS. What an amusing creature she was when in the mood. How she would make a room full of people hang on her lips as she would tell stories of her travels and adventures in search of the wonder-working workers in magic and sorcery. And their eyes opened in amazement when she would now and again ring some astral bell or make some raps or do some other phenomenon.
And a new reader.
Okay, Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
She used to say that the Russian, Austrian, and French women might be very bad in their conduct, but were far more honest than the British and American women of the like social standing, since they did their wicked things in the eyes of the whole world, while the others did their equally bad things behind doors and in hiding places of all sorts. Undoubtedly, her rough ways, her daring eccentricities, her profanity, and other peculiarities were simply her passionate protest against the shams and hypocrisy of society. A pretty woman with her brains would never have dreamt of making herself so talked about. Being the reverse of pretty, both in face and form, she instinctively let herself make a splash all around her. one having no admirers to lose, hence no reason to put her feelings under restraint. I am now talking, of course, about the woman, not about the sage.
Yeah, I think that last comment's quite interesting, right? Suggesting that when she was an amanuensis or channeling the higher consciousness of her masters, that she really was transformed. She had quite a colorful personality. Certainly one of the original liberated women, huh? Okay. As I mentioned last time, the look and feel of both webinar series has been updated. In this, the Secret Doctrine series, the verse under consideration will now appear on the far left in a colored panel, with the part of the verse under consideration set off in bold. On the far right will be a facsimile of the page in the Secret Doctrine that we are working on, with a highlighted panel indicating just where we are in the text. Readers will always read the text in the center of the page. We're doing away altogether with the grayed out text, so I think it's going to be much easier to read this. If you have any thoughts on these changes, just let us know in the chat box. Okay, we finished up our last session in the middle of the final analysis of verse 3 of stanza 5. So far, Fohat, who is the guiding spirit and leader of the innumerable sparks, which includes every unit of consciousness and all the kingdoms of nature, begins by separating out the mineral atoms and then, quote, forms therewith the germs of wheels. We went over this much last time. Through Fohatic impulse, this noumenal wheel begins its involutionary cycle. The center of this wheel is a quote-unquote radiant, joyous spark, marked with, but not necessarily conscious of, the awareness gained in a previous Manvantara. This spark exists on a more causal level than that which is attracted to it, revolves around it, and eventually appears as a sphere in time and space. Following the activation of the mineral kingdom comes a sequential in-wheeling, if you will, of the remaining kingdoms in nature. This is a perfect example of the biblical statement, the first shall be last, since the mineral kingdom is the first chosen by Fohat and will be last on the evolutionary path of return. That said, MPH offers a convincing alternative theory for the meaning of the phrase sparks of the lower kingdom, which we'll take a look at in a moment. Okay, next we have, he places them in the 6 directions of space. HPB specifically addresses this line in the last paragraph of her verse 3 commentary, describing it as the, quote, double triangle, the junction and blending together of pure spirit and matter. Obviously, this esoteric comment extends beyond the 6 physical directions. In fact, space is one of the most mysterious concepts introduced in the Secret Doctrine. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Its one absolute attribute, which is itself eternal, ceaseless motion, is called in esoteric parlance the great breath, which is the perpetual motion of the universe in the sense of limit. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. I heard some other noise. It is called in esoteric parlance the great breath, which is the perpetual motion of the universe in the sense of limitless, ever-present space. The first illustration being a plain disk, the second one in the archaic symbol shows a disk with a point in it. The first differentiation in the periodical manifestations of the ever-eternal nature, sexless and infinite, aditi in that, Rigveda. The point in the disk, or potential space within abstract space. In its third stage, the point is transformed into a diameter. It now symbolizes a divine, immaculate Mother Nature within the all-embracing absolute infinitude.
Thanks, Carrie. The juncture of, quote, potential space within abstract space is the, quote, junction and blending together of pure spirit and matter, which is symbolized by the double triangle. We'll get further insight from this question and answer session from the Secret Doctrine Dialogues that specifically references this part of the commentary. Can we get a reader, please?
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Okay. Mr. A. Kitely, in speaking of the six directions of space, is the term direction used in its ordinary sense, or does it mean here a property or attribute of space? Madam Blavatsky, simply figuratively, it means the macrocosm is divided in occult philosophy just as the microcosm. That is to say, into six principles synthesized by the seventh, and space here is not limited to any particular area. Mr. A. Kitely, then space is used in its widest metaphysical sense. Madam Blavatsky, in its widest physical sense. Every time I say space without the word manifested, it means in its widest metaphysical sense. If I want to speak about space in this universe, I would say manifested space or something like that, just to make some qualification.
Thanks, Greg. By the way, Kitely, pictured here, helped HPB edit the Secret Doctrine and was General Secretary of the English Theosophical Society when it was when the Secret Doctrine was published in 1888. This entire volume, Secret Doctrine Dialogues, is a dialogue between various students and Blavatsky. It's quite interesting. All right, let's see. Any thoughts or questions about this, the content? Okay, next. The final phrase of verse 3. And one in the middle, the central wheel. HPB doesn't comment on the central wheel per se, but an old commentary and a treatise on cosmic fire, it's towards the end of the book actually, gives us a vivid description of this primordial cosmic wheel. Can we get a reader for this old commentary?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
One wheel turns. One turn alone is made, and every sphere and suns of all degrees follow its course. The night of time is lost in it, and kalpas measure less than seconds in the little day of man. 10 million kalpas pass, and twice 10 million Brahmic cycles, and yet 1 hour of cosmic time is not completed. Within the wheel, forming that wheel, are all the lesser wheels, from the first to the 10th dimension. These in their cyclic turn hold in their spheres of force other and lesser wheels. Yet many suns compose the cosmic one. Wheels within wheels, spheres within spheres, each pursues his course and attracts or rejects his brother, and yet cannot escape from the encircling arms of the mother. When the wheels of the fourth dimension, of which our sun is one, and all that is of lesser force and higher number, such as the 8th and 9th degrees, turn upon themselves, devour each other, and turn and rend their mother, then will the cosmic wheel be ready for a faster revolution.
Thoughts or questions? This is one of the great cosmic central wheel. No, not one of them. This is the one great cosmic central wheel, which carries within it all manifestation. But each logos is also a central wheel. Our solar logos is specifically described in stanza 3 from Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Let me see. Anne Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Stanza 3. The great wheel turned upon itself, the 7 lesser wheels rushing into being. They revolve like the mother around, within, and forward. All that existed was. The wheels were diverse and in unification one. As evolved the great wheel, the inner fire burst forth. It touched into life, wheel the first. It circulated. A million fires rose up. The quality of matter densified, but form was not.
Thank you, Anne Veronica. So when compared to the turning of the great cosmic wheel that we just read about, the events described here in stanza 3 happen in a mere flash of time, a cosmic moment. Before we move on from verse 3, let's see what Manly P. Hall has to say about this verse. Could we get a reader on the right?
Yes. Christine, can you read that for us, please? Yourself. There you go.
Verse 3?
No, just on the right.
Oh, just on the right. Okay.
Verse 3, that will always be there. You know, it's just references where we are in the material. So,
My eyes went there first. Sorry.
yeah, no problem.
Fohat is the power that rules the sparks, as the nerves rule the organs of the body. He separates the denser particles that dwell in the darkness below and forms of them nerve plexi or seed atoms, which will later become planets. He places them in the 6 directions in the form of an interlaced triangle. And in the center, he places the 7th. And this 7th is the one of the great 7. So the body of the universe is ordained.
Thank you. So to my ear, this is a profound interpretation of verse 3. MPH here provides us with an esoteric template for the creation of the 7 planets by identifying their prototypes as the, quote, denser particles that dwell in the darkness below. This is an alternative theory to HPB's suggestion that these sparks represent the mineral kingdom, though certainly the physical planets are primary means for the mineral kingdom to manifest. So, according to MPH, through the distributive and organizing agency of Fohat, these quote unquote particles become the nerve plexi of the solar systemic nervous system. This is in keeping with DK's teachings that the planets form the 7 chakras of the solar logos. For me, equating these dense particles as future planets with the quote sparks of the lower kingdom is a compelling interpretation of this part of the verse. Okay, any final thoughts or questions on anything from verse 3? It's kind of difficult to pick up here at the end. We stopped in the middle of this interpretation last time. So it's, you have to come up to speed pretty quickly on this verse. But hopefully you're able to get some sense of it as a result. Okay, alrighty. Let's on to the 4th verse of stanza 5. Fohat traces spiral lines to unite the 6th to the 7th, the crown. An army of the sons of light stand at each angle, and the Lepika in the middle wheel. They say, "This is good. The first divine world is ready. The first is now the second." Then the divine Arupa reflects itself in Chahaya Loka, the first garment of the Anupadaka. So let's take a look at the first paragraph of HPB's commentary, which references, quote, "Fohat traces spiral lines to unite the sixth to the seventh, the crown." Could we get a reader for this? Always the middle segment. Go ahead.
Okay. This tracing of spiral lines refers to the evolution of man's as well as nature's principles. An evolution which takes place gradually, as will be seen in Book 2 on the origin of the human races, as does everything else in nature. The sixth principle in man, Buddhi, the divine soul, through a mere breath in our conceptions, is still something material when compared with divine spirit, Atma, of which it is the carrier or vehicle. Fohat, in his capacity of divine love, Eros, the electric power of affinity and sympathy, is shown allegorically as trying to bring the pure spirit, the ray inseparable from the one absolute, into union with the soul, the two constituting in man the monad, and in nature the first link between the ever conditioned and the manifested.
Unconditioned.
Oh, sorry, unconditioned and manifested. The first is now the second world of the Lipikas, has reference to the same.
Thanks, Biel. Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay, first, this tracing of spiral lines. This is Fohat doing the tracing, right? We might hypothesize that these traced spiral lines are spiral because in this solar system, motion is spiralic. Just as in the last solar system, it was rotary, and in the next and final system, it will be direct motion. The qualities of these three motions is also directly related to the three rays of aspect. Thus, spiralic motion is an expression of the second ray of love wisdom, the ray of our solar system and of this second solar system. It would be interesting to know whether in the previous solar system, Fohat traced circular lines instead of spiralic. Let's take a look at an excerpt from the Theosophical Glossary entry on the spiral. Note the triple-headed caduceus, which can be found on page 550 of the Secret Doctrine, and which represents everything from the kundalini of a human being to the triple force of a rod of initiation to the triple solar system just mentioned. In all cases, it is a Fohatic symbol par excellence. Could we get a reader, please?
Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
The spiral form is an apt illustration of the course of evolution, which brings motion round towards the same point, yet without reception. The serpent and the figure 8, the infinity sign denoting the octoad and infinity octoad.
Yeah, Ogdoad. That's exactly right.
Infinity stand for spiral cyclic motion. The course of Fohat in space is spiral, and spirit descends into matter in spiral courses, repeating the process by which a helix is derived from a circle produces a vortex. The complicated spirals of cosmic evolution bring the motion back to the point from which it started at the birth of a great cosmic age.
Thank you. Ogdoad just means eightfold, that having to do with eightness, right?
Okay.
And then
Thank you.
in that, it really has to do with the figure eight, that's the connection with eight in this case, right? Because it has that spiralic motion.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about this Anupudaka, was it?
Yeah.
Previously, what is it? What does it mean?
It's actually, and we'll get there, but it actually means parentless or that which is self-generating.
Okay.
So it's not only a creator, but it creates itself from the abstract. It's the highest form of deity, really. And it was a misreading, and we'll get to this, but it was actually misread by HPB. It's not Anupadaka, it's Aupapadaka, but we'll get there in a minute. Very strange word. Okay, let's see. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. The central illustration makes clear how spirals follow a circular pattern, which can be seen when viewed from above. That's the lower part of the illustration. So it's an extended circular motion, a direct combination of direct motion, which forms its central spine, and the circular motion, together making a spiral. Next, let's see. This tracing of spiral lines refers to the evolution of man's as well as nature's principles. This reference to evolution reminds us that Fohat is the active agent in both involutional and evolutional cycles. Initially, it is the constructive power that, through the, quote, hardening of the atoms, carries out the plan of manifestation, thus objectivizing universal ideation. Could we get a reader for this? This describes this part of it.
Yes, but just a minute here.
Yeah.
Efrosini has a question. She says, the sixth principle for the Tibetan master corresponds to the monadic plane, while here to the Buddhic principle. Why is there such a difference?
It's actually the Atmic principle. And straight theosophy, that is to say, 19th century theosophy, has a different understanding. For instance, the monad in 19th century theosophy is a combination of the Atma Buddhi, in other words, the essence, which is the Atman, and the Buddhi, which is the vehicle of the Atman. And we'll be covering this. Whereas in DK theosophy, this is the Atma Mana Buddhi, which is the triadal deity, right, is itself the vehicle for the monad, which is on the second subplane, right, of the cosmic physical plane. So it's a little different orientation. I don't think it's actually different in conceptually, but different in language and just where they place it in the hierarchy. Okay, can we get a reader, please? For this quote from page 110 in the Secret Doctrine. Hello?
Oh, Lynn, can you read it for us, please?
I'm sorry, I was out of the room. Fohat, running along the seven principles of Akasa, acts upon manifested substance or the one element, and by differentiating it into various centers of energy, sets in motion the law of cosmic evolution, which in obedience to the ideation of the universal mind brings into existence all the various states of being in the manifested solar system. The solar system brought into existence by these agencies consists of seven principles, like everything else within these centers. Such is the teaching of the Trans-Himalayan esotericism. Every philosophy, however, has its own way of dividing these principles.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, but since Fohat also links mind and matter in the evolutionary cycle, it eventually becomes the agent of release from matter. What's described here is the evolutionary cycle and how it embeds spirit into the form aspect, right? Thus, spiralic movement is dual and bidirectional. A little further in the Secret Doctrine, HPB says, while science speaks of its evolution through brute matter, blind force, and senseless motion, the occultists point to intelligent law and sentient life, and add that Fohat is the guiding spirit of all this. We took a brief look at this chart's depiction of a human being's 7 principles, but since these principles will be increasingly referred to in the Secret Doctrine, I think it would be useful for us to do a mini tutorial on these principles using the Theosophical Glossary entry as a guide. So then we'll start with this page, and could we get a reader here, please?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Principles, a beginning, foundation, source, or essence from which things proceed. Principles are thus the fundamental essences out of which and from which all things are and exist, usually enumerated as 7 in the Theosophical writings. These cosmic principles, corresponding to the 7 planes of the cosmos, the 7 basic types of consciousness substance of which the universe is formed, are manifested in the human being, so that we speak of the 7 human principles, copies in the small of the 7 principles of the universe. The 7 human principles are not a confederation of distinct entities, for man himself is essentially a unit, a monad, expressing his potentialities through a series of vehicles or vestures. The 7 principles severally exist as aspects of human consciousness. Whether cosmic or human, they are usually divided into a higher triad and a lower quaternary, these being the numbers of the spiritual and material side of nature respectively. The higher triad is Atman, Buddhi, and Manas, or more correctly expressed, Atman, Atma Buddhi, and Atma Buddhi Manas. The quaternary was originally given as Kama Rupa, Prana, Linga Sarira, and Sthula Sarira.
Thank you, Carrie. So most importantly here is that the 7 human principles are directly related. What he says, copied in small of the 7 universal principles. So can we get a reader for this next, please?
Okay, Joe?
Yes.
Thank you.
In a later enumeration, Sathula Sahariya was omitted from the list as not being a principle in itself, but the vehicle of the other principles, and the quaternary was made up by adding the lower aspect of Manas. The septonate may also be regarded as a higher and lower triad united by Manas, which can attach itself to either, and in our present stage of evolution is oscillating between the two. Since these 7 rudimentary principles are omnipresent, they give rise to subordinate septonates within the larger septonates, so that each principle is itself divided into 7, repeating nature's fundamental structure indefinitely. This becomes clearer when we bear in mind that the universe in all its parts is composed of monads, and that every monad in manifestation expresses itself as a septonate. Though principles and elements are essentially the same, it is convenient to make a distinction whereby the term principle is used for the force or spirit aspect and element for the vehicular aspect, the principle being the inner and the element the outer aspect, flowing forth from the principle as its vital vehicle or clothing.
Thank you, Joe. I saw a hand jump up there.
Yeah, I saw a hand go up and come down, and I didn't see whose it was. I'm sorry. If someone has a question, if you'll raise your hand again, we'll call on you.
Might have just been a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. Any thoughts or questions about this? Anything on this page before we move on? Possibly the most important point brought out here is the repeating nature of the 7 within 7 within 7 within 7, right? That that it's an infinite in both directions until you come finally to that great singularity that is the third logos. But otherwise, even his, her, slash, it's not a he, of course, he, her, slash expression is itself sevenfold, and that's the first sevenfold division.
Francis?
Yeah.
Sonia says, why is comma separate from linga sarira? Is it the heart center, she asked?
Yeah, well, that's interesting because in DK astrology, we see desire or karma a little differently. Notice here that linga sharira is the form aspect of desire, and that's not a distinction we make so much in DK astrology. You know, this came first, remember, and then it was refined by the DK Alice Bailey work. So you have actually this is very very much like the Greek method. You know, karma as an aspect of the soul was the desire to incarnate, the need for experience, and that stays with. It's different than our normal desire life, you know, that we associate with the astral body. You know, it was actually the name of a goddess, Persephone, and every culture had their own version of this goddess. But it's that spiritual aspect of ourselves that seeks experience, right, as opposed to the nous, N-O-U-S, also called a phren, P-H-R-E-N, which is the spiritual soul, the higher aspect of the soul. And these were together considered the two aspects of the soul. So now I don't know if what I just said exactly relates to 19th century theosophy, but I think it's close to that. You know, so in one aspect you have the form, and the other you have the desire for incarnation. Any other questions?
Yes, a couple more. Oops, I just lost it here. Christine says, any reference here to HPB's 7-point star?
The 7-pointed star really is the third logos. It's the 7 and 1, the 7 aspects, which are rays of the one, and then that manifest as the sacred planets, and also as which are directly connected with, in terms of rulership, with the planes of the cosmic physical plane. Right. So yes, you're going to have some reference to what we see here, these 7 aspects, which also are, you know, loosely related to the 7 planes, right? But it's not an identical system. In other words, it's not. Well, as I was just describing, I believe it wasn't Aunt Veronica. Who was it that asked the question about the monad compared to the in both systems? But anyway, it's more or less, you know, you have 7 principles here related, and you have 7 planes. One, as he described in this last slide. One being an element and the other being a principle.
Okay, it
Oh,
was.
no, that's in this page. Yeah, here it is. Yeah.
Oh,
So we have the element is the outer aspect, and the principle is the inner aspect. Go ahead.
Okay, it was Efrosini who asked
Yeah,
that
that's
question,
right.
and she has a follow-on question. She says, "Can you explain why the physical body is not a principle?"
Yeah, it's not a source of energy. It's just an effect of the etheric body, right? So the etheric body is you could say the vehicle for the pranic life force body. And you also have to remember that astral in the 19th century theosophy had a very different meaning than the very specific meaning that it does in DK. It's basically, I mean, it can even include the Akashic. You'll find in the readings of the 19th century theosophy that in some ways it includes everything above the physical, right? So it's a bit different in that understanding. So here, and I remember reading this before, that it is inclusive of the etheric body. So again, you have the desire nature and the life force manifested, and those would be akin to the principles manifesting through the element or the body of the astral body, right? And then the physical body is the effect, or you could say the place of demonstration for all the higher elements and principles.
Okay, we still have a lot more comments, and we have a hand up. Anne Veronica says there is a triplicity on the astral plane.
Can you say more about that?
Yes, hello. I was trying to do the equivalent of the planes as we know them, and I put the astral plane, the desire, the life force, and the astral body, and thought of it that the higher planes of the astral plane, the middle, and the lower planes.
I see. Yeah.
And here, the etheric body is missing. It gives the physical body, unless I don't know, the linga sarira. I don't know
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
I don't know the term. Could it be the etheric body?
No, I think it's in this breakout. The etheric is part of the astral body. They didn't, like I said, it's we're now so used to the Alice Bailey method that that's broken. That's a separative thing, and I think it's more accurate. So the astral body was inclusive of both of those, because here you're seeing, prana demonstrates through the etheric body, right? And and is actually what keeps us alive in our physical bodies, right?
Yes, I would have put it a step down, but it puts it between desire and astral body.
But, in a way, what you're saying is, you would modify the 19th century method to conform with what came to us through decay. And so what we have to do, this is a study of the Secret Doctrine written in 1888. So in a way, we have to just try to understand how they broke it down and recognize the differences. And some of them are somewhat irreconcilable because, for instance, the term astral itself meant something quite different. It included astral, the DK's astral, but it also was included much more of the unseen realms, you could say. So Yeah, I agree
So
with
we
you.
can say
I
that
would insert an astral, I would insert an etheric body too, but then what we're doing is basically taking on DK's understanding, you know. And I think that is a more correct understanding.
whatever I have understand from the Secret Doctrine, the terms were not made yet. The terms were made later on in the Tree in Cosmic Fire. We didn't have all the terms. So you
That's
see,
right.
yes.
Yeah. And so
You see
the terms
this
we're looking,
overlapping.
I'm sorry, say again.
You see overlapping because there wasn't a strict form of terms yet being voiced, I would say.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you had a master of wisdom come forth and describe the nature of both the elements and the principles. I think in a clearer, more straightforward way, that through DK. And interestingly, he worked with HPB also, but at that time, these terms had been established before she wrote that book. You will find these in earlier theosophical works. Okay, let's. Do we have any others?
Yes, we have a comment from Sonia, but first let's go to Greg. He's had his hand up for a while. Go ahead, Greg.
When I studied the Tibetan Book of the Dead, one of the parts of when you go into the bardo and you actually go in between the worlds, when you're preparing to set up your new life in a sense, or preparing to see where you're going to be incarnated, there is a time when you go through the place where the hungry ghosts are. And really, I think that was just a metaphorical term, but the hungry ghosts kind of compile up all the desires and distractions and everything that binds us to the physical world.
That's
Although
right.
It's no element, there's no elemental form, except you can look at it from the perspective that it is astral matter, which is much more feeling-based or emotion-based matter. But when we go through the time of the hungry ghosts, I mean, heck, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they're spending weeks in there, like 2 or 3 weeks sometimes. And you have to face all of your emotions and all of your fears and all of everything comes forward. And that is the distractive quality of the astral body. And I don't know, right. I think DK, I can't really reference him, but I think he might actually have a more of a relationship to that understanding of it. We try to rise above the astral body, because once we reach the mental body, then the astral is still going to be there, but we've developed like an antakarana so we can make the transition a little bit easier. But it's when we go into that point between the physical and the mental at the highest level, we have to deal with this astral stuff, which is our own desires and our own glamours and everything like that.
Yeah, that's actually very well said, Greg. Good description of, connecting the idea of the Buddhist idea of the hungry ghost and the lower astral. It is what magnetically draws, as you pointed out, draws us back into existence over and over and over again, right? It's part of the long process of gaining experience, which is a very necessary process. There's a kind of puerile viewpoint, which is that somehow all you have to do is just get over your desire, and then you can move on and get with the important part. But that's not at all the case. It's a
purificatory process, because we have to purify all those
desires eventually, but initially it's developmental, and you have to develop your 3 bodies and then integrate them. That takes thousands of lifetimes, and that's it's not a process that can be bypassed by sudden enlightenment or anything like that. It doesn't work that way. You have to build it up before you can move beyond it, because it's
Yep.
always integrative. You integrate the final integrated personality. You integrate it with the soul so that it can be a vehicle for soul expression. You don't leave it behind.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg. Good.
Uh-huh.
Some good thoughts.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yes, we have a couple of more here. Let me get all of Sonia's. Okay, she says, I just see that this is very similar to the tree of life. So it explains why it is so. So the Stula Sarira is out because the Param Atman is out, and these two are Keter and Malkut. And then she says, no, she says, no, I correct myself. The Atman is Keter. And then she says, in that view, Kama is Tiferet, as I said, the heart. So
Right. It is connected to the heart. Yeah, it is connected to the heart, but it's a little different understanding of the heart. This is a big subject, but it's that expansion of embracing the human condition rather than trying to escape it upwards, right? That that embraces this part of the comic, right? Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to think. Ayin Sof is the para in the system you're describing. The Sephiroth. Ayin Soph, S-O-P-H, right, which is basically translated as beyond knowing, is in this position, and then from that you have Kether at the Atman position, and you're right. Malkuth is that dropped 10th position, right, which is really in a way not part of it, yet it is, because that's where we find ourselves in the physical world. So yeah, definitely related. And you have, the lines between the Sephiroth are more energetic, whereas the actual Sephiroth themselves are more like the elements or the stations or the planes, But anyway, yeah. We will eventually, in the Secret Doctrine, really take a look at that system. That's part of the material that she takes a look at. Okay, someone else?
yes, Efrosini says, according to Blavatsky, Linga Sarira, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, it is the eidolon, and I probably butchered that too, of the Greeks, the idol, the double, and the matrix of the physical body.
Yeah. Okay. That's, I haven't, that's how I remember it as well. Yeah. It's so as the double, see, that's its etheric aspect, right? Because the Stula Sharira is the effect of the etheric body. There's nothing initiated in or by the physical vehicle, right? Except for its gradual deterioration. It's the etheric principle, and my memory too says that that is one of the qualities of the Linga Sharira, the prototype, if you will, of the lowest. Anyone else?
Yes, I think we just have one more. Anne Veronica says, I just read today, you can't take initiation if you do not substitute your lower ether to the higher ethers. That is the higher plane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically the lower ethers are the top four subplanes of each of the lower planes, right? So you have what's called the etheric top four, and then you have the four etheric of the astral, and then the four etheric of the mental, wherein the soul and causal body reside, right? And that all those have their higher counterparts But especially the lower two have to be brought to that point to where they're identified with through the building of the antikarana, their higher counterparts, right? Initially, that's in the soul aspect or in the causal body, in the egoic lotus. But that is in turn informed by the triad, which exists in the higher ethers. Anyone else?
No, I think that's it for right now.
Okay, so continuing with our little mini tutorial, could we get a reader, please?
I think I was called upon to read, but
Yes, go ahead, Martha. That'd be
basically,
great.
should I be reading basically these human principles?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Basically, these human principles are the original essences or elements in the constitution of any entity, macrocosmic or microcosmic. When these elements or essences are integrated into a unit by the power inherent in the essential self of such an entity. Thus, there are principles of a cosmos or universe, of a sun, a globe, a man, beast, plant, mineral, and of an elemental. All religions and philosophies in all times have taught, albeit after various manners, that man or world or any other being is much more than a physical body. The physical bodies or vehicles are but the outer shells or carriers of inward, invisible, ethereal, and spiritual potencies or essences. In attempting to define the various parts of which our being is composed, many methods of dividing the human constitution have been adopted by different schools following different ways. The theosophic system is a division into 7 principles or ultimate elements or essences. And everything within the cosmos is built of the same fundamental spiritual essence or substance, and after the same general pattern. Other systems of division are possible. For instance, the Christian threefold division of spirit, soul, and body. But the septenary classification is the most ancient one, and it is the common inheritance of all the esoteric schools left to the sages of the 5th race by the great Siddhas, Nirmanakayas, of the 4th, Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, page 636. The following table, page 596, shows the analogy between the 7 human aspects and the cosmic aspects.
Okay, you don't have to read this, but and I will take you through it very, very quickly. So it's numbered from below to above, right? Again, and then you have the other numbering here in small print. So you move from the physical body, which is the Stula Sharira, to the model body, as we were just describing, which is the etheric body. And then you move into the life essence, pranic vitality, the animal soul. This is what I was describing that the Greeks were real big on. Their whole lesser mysteries were oriented around this animal soul, the kama or desire nature for incarnation, right? Then you have the human soul, manas, mind, that's friend or nous. Then buddhi, spiritual soul, atman, spirit, essential self. And all these, and I'm not going to go through these, have their correspondences in higher or cosmic realities, right? For instance, the unmanifested or first logos is the equivalent in logoic terms to the Atman, or pure spirit, unmanifested pure spirit aspect of the human being. Okay? All right. So any questions about this before we go on? We'll be taking a closer look at levels 6 and 7 in a minute. Okay, back to the text. Next, this tracing of spiral lines refers to the evolution of man's as well as nature's principles, and evolution which takes place gradually, as will be seen in Book 2, on the origins of the human races, as does everything else in nature. Actually, the section, excuse me just a moment.
What are we hearing?
Could you turn that off or shut the door or something? Okay, I'm sorry, I had an interruption there. So actually, that's good though. It gave you time to look at this daunting list. The section that sounds like it's a brief section that was referred to here, Origins of the Human Races, takes up pretty much all of the second volume of the Secret Doctrine, as you can see by the list of the relevant chapters shown here. So this is a huge study, and it's basically the entire second volume. Next, the sixth principle in man, Buddhi, the divine soul, though a mere breath in our conception, is still something material when compared with divine spirit, Atma, of which it is the carrier or vehicle. Here we see the sixth and seventh principles, which are counted from below upwards. Let's continue our mini tutorial by taking a closer look at the entries for each of these two principles. Can we get a reader, please, for this?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Atman, Sanskrit, Atman self, the highest part of human being, pure consciousness, that cosmic self, which is the same in every dweller on this globe and on every one of the planetary or stellar bodies in space. It is the feeling and knowledge of I am, pure cognition, the abstract idea of self. It does not differ at all throughout the cosmos, except in degree of self-recognition. Though universal, it belongs in our present stage of evolution to the fourth cosmic plane, though it is our seventh principle counting upwards. It may also be considered as the first logos in the human microcosm. During incarnation, the lowest aspects of Atman take on attributes because it is linked with Buddhi, as Buddhi is linked with Manas, as Manas is linked with Kama, etc. Kama is for each individualized consciousness.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. Atman is for
okay. Atman, thank you, is for each individualized consciousness, its Leia center or entranceway into cosmic manifestation. It is ourself precisely because it is a link which connects us with the cosmic hierarch. Through this Atmic Laya center stream, the divine forces from above, which by their unfolding on the lower planes originate and become seven principles. We say that the Spirit, the Father in secret of Jesus, or Atman, is no individual property of any man, but is the divine essence, which has no body, no form, which is imponderable, invisible, and indivisible, that which does not exist and yet is, as the Buddhists say of nirvana. It only overshadows the mortal, that which enters into him and pervades the whole body, being only its omnipresent rays or light, radiated through Buddhi, its vehicle and direct emanation.
Thank you. Any questions about Atman? You know, in some ways, it's the easiest to understand because of the its unified aspect, right? It is the radical unity that exists in all units of consciousness, right? And yet, there's no way we're going to directly know this until a very high initiation. In fact, every initiation, it just unfolds us towards the knowingness of this. You know, translated into the DK literature, he says that, you know, this is having some experience of the monad, of which Atman is the higher part, because it's monad is Atma Buddhi, only comes in a very briefly for at the third initiation, where you finally have an understanding of this. And then you take on the process of identification in order to come into awareness of this Atman. Until that time, we're into relational alignment in order to connect with the energy of the soul. But at this stage of Atmic reality, it is unity and through identification. Okay.
We had a couple hands up and they've both gone down now. Greg had his hand up and Christine had her hand up.
Okay, okay, there it is again.
Yeah, that was Christine. Did you want to say something? Did you have a question, Christine?
Yeah, I'm really baffled here. I don't know what this reference is. This can't be Keys to Theosophy. OTG, what is that?
Online Theosophical Glossary.
Okay, here's my problem. We say that the Spirit, the Father in secret of Jesus, or Atman, whoa.
What's the problem? Oh, well, okay. The Father in secret, you know, my Father in heaven is what he was referring to, in fact, was that principle which is Atmic, which has its reality in Shambhala, right? In other words, that quality of deity, which is the first principle, which on our planet is manifest through Shambhala and the planetary logos, is connected energetically with all the monads of human beings, right? So the quote, Father in secret is that planetary logos, right? Which is one with the Atman.
What about Jesus?
Well, Jesus is just like, in a sense, we're all Jesus, you know. The reason he's using this phrase, the Father in secret of Jesus, is because that's a biblical phrase, a reference to the Father in secret that Jesus made in the Bible and the New Testament. It's not Jesus that's being talked about here. It's Jesus's reference to the Father in secret that's being described here.
I'm gonna have to live with that.
I'm not sure your problem, but with this, Jesus describes, you know, it's like when he says, thy will, not my will, he's saying that to this Father in secret or the Father in heaven, right? And in a sense, any initiate level of consciousness we could equate with Jesus. I can understand your sudden alarm because you imagine that we're suddenly shifting over to a Christian orientation, but it's just used as an example of because it might be familiar to a reader of the use of this quality of Atman as being related to the Father in secret. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Okay. This is a useful description of Atman. I find there's a lot lot here that's good. But I do take exception with this statement. It is the feeling and knowledge of I am, since the beingness that characterizes Atman is totally beyond any kind of feeling or knowingness at all. But, I think it's just a language way of trying to describe it. This fourth cosmic plane, of course, is the cosmic Buddhic, is the extension downwards. Yeah. And it is the doorway or entranceway into the cosmic manifestation or cosmic understanding. Any further questions about Atma? Like I said, easy to
Yes.
understand. Go ahead.
Okay, Robert's got a question. Okay, go ahead, Robert.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think what you just said, Francis, is important. That like it is the feeling, astral body, and knowledge, mental body of I am. They refer to the Atma as not I am, but I am that I am. In other words, it's a whole other level.
And that can be reduced to I am. Another similar saying is not is, but me. And it sounds like somebody with an enormous ego or somebody who has come to the place where they recognize the what's called the radical unity of all essence.
Mm-hmm. But
Yes.
I think maybe part of what's happening is we have the 19th century theosophy, we have the ancient Indian language and phrases, then we have the glossary, which kind of puts its own spin, and then we have the Tibetan's work. So
That's true.
It's very hard to kind of put them all together. And I just wanted to comment on that one mention earlier where somebody referred to the hungry ghosts from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And in our modern world, we tend to think everything's sort of a symbol, like psychological and symbolic. But actually, from my 2 cents of understanding, the hungry ghosts, that's a very real thing, that when we die in our astral body, we move into the astral plane. In those realms and subplanes of the astral plane, we've got different stages. There are souls, astral bodies who are coming back into incarnation. We have bodies, souls who are stuck in the astral plane. There are those who are trying to move upwards. And so the hungry ghosts are very real. It's just those who are still caught in the level of desire. And that's why it kind of behooves us to clean the stuff up as much as possible in our incarnation, because then we can move through that period more smoothly and efficiently, rather than getting caught in something which is a bit of a morass. Anyway.
Yeah, that's well said. It's more than just a metaphor. I think it's at that level, it's a stark reality.
Yeah.
The ghost being, of course, the fact that it's not in incarnation, and then the hunger is that desire for existence and all that will bring to it.
Mm-hmm.
So very much, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say that the online Theosophical Glossary is, for the most part, pretty much altogether aligned with 19th century theosophy. It doesn't. There's no, for instance, Alice Bailey theosophy terms or recognition in that. Now, it's an extraordinarily valuable source, as is the Secret Doctrine. So, it's only in some of these odd terminologies and slight lack of absolute alignment where you're going to find a problem. For the most part, modern and 19th century theosophy are very much in accord So, I don't want to accentuate the difference too much here, though these terms are probably one of the places where it exists the most. Okay.
We have another question here.
Yeah.
Okay. Anne Veronica says, have I understood well that this plane is the equivalent of the monadic plane?
It's Tim. Yeah, it's actually it's the Atmic, but see, the Atmic in a sense is the gosh, how can you say this? The Fohat in its binding of spirit to matter. The first place that it does this systemically is on the Atmic plane, right? And therefore, the existence of the monad takes form because, the higher triad is essentially the form aspect of the monad, but it carries its essential selfness in that threefold nature. And then the monad formless is on the monadic plane. I don't know how to say it other than that. And I get it that there's a discrepancy between Atmic and Atman and just where they exist. From another point of view, you could say that Atman is ultimately something that is from the highest subplane, the sea of fire, because it is truly just the essence of self. Michael sometimes teaches about the two stages of the monad being the first and second subplanes, right, of the cosmic physical. One carrying three essences, the highest of the three rays of aspect, and then the second plane being the seven rays. So it's a complicated. It gets complicated when you try to exactly interleave it, right? That's about all I can say about that. Anyone else? Okay. So, can we get a reader for this section on booty?
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. Booty, from the verbal root boot, to awaken, enlighten, know. The spiritual soul, the faculty of discriminating, the channel through which streams divine inspiration from the Atman to the ego, and therefore that faculty which enables us to discern between good and evil, spiritual conscience. The qualities of the Buddhic principle, when awakened, are higher judgment, instant understanding, discrimination, intuition, love that has no bounds, and consequent universal forgiveness. In the theosophical scheme, it is the sixth principle counting upwards in the human constitution, the vehicle of pure universal spirit, hence an inseparable garment or vehicle of Atman. In its essence of the highest plane of Akasha or Alaya, Booty stands in the same relation to Atman as on the cosmic scale. Mula Prakriti does to Parabrahman.
Any thoughts or questions about this? Booty is the vehicle of Atman, right? The spiritual soul, with an emphasis on the word spiritual here. Equivalent to the second logos. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else in this that needs to be, in the association with DK theosophy is, of course, that this is the plane of the intuition. In fact, it's called the intuitive plane, right? Okay. Okay, back to the text. See, first of all, is there any questions on anything having to do with the principles? Sorry that I'm not a scholar on the exact relations between DK and HPB. I would like to know more about that. The problem is that you're usually reading either in one system or the other, so you don't get that cross-referencing that much, except for by third party, and I've yet to find something that really definitively relates them. Okay, back to the text. Fohat, in his capacity of divine love, eros, the electric power of affinity and sympathy, is shown allegorically as trying to bring the pure spirit, the ray inseparable from the one absolute, into union with the soul. It's a mouthful. In the context of this paragraph, the ray inseparable from the one absolute is the Atman, right? Which in a cosmic context is the first or unmanifested logos. Next, the two, spirit and soul, constituting in man the monad. So you see here, that's Atma Buddhi, that she is describing as the monad. The difference in the understanding to me is just simply the pure essence on the monadic plane in DK speak, with the Atma Buddhi Manas as the vehicle of monad. Frankly, for our purposes, either will work just fine. So spirit and soul in 19th century theosophy constitute the monad. And in nature, the first link between the ever unconditioned and the manifested. That's that gateway from into the realm of pure spirit. The ever unconditioned is pure spirit, Atman, the ray inseparable from the one absolute. But the monad is a product of both spirit and soul, its vehicle. As a result of this fohatic linking, quote, the first is now the second world. Any thoughts or questions on this?
Yes, Christine's got her hand up. Go ahead, Christine.
My mechanics here are working backwards. I don't know whether I'm on and off, so I defer back.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go on.
Well, we could hear, is that?
Did you actually have something, or are you just having a problem with your toggle switch?
I'm not real clear on what we're talking about when we talk about first and second worlds. That not linked.
Okay. All it is that the Atman, which is the completely unmanifest,
yes,
and is the higher aspect of the two that make up the monad, right? Two constituting the monad. That's the first world. It's purely noumenal. That is to say, it is in every way unmanifest. And then when the first is now the second, that suggests that it takes on the vehicle of Buddhi. And then the first is now the second. And that is together in this form of understanding, that is now the monad.
Are we talking consciousness when we say world?
Yes, you're talking planes of consciousness.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be confusing. Right.
Okay. I don't want to go back too far. I'll just leave it.
Yeah, well, any question you have, there's going to be other people that have the questions you have, so you're always welcome to ask questions.
Yeah, I mean, I define things by levels of consciousness. For instance, first there's the point, then there's the line. You understand where I'm going with that?
Sure.
Yeah, and so now you're talking worlds, and I'm thinking maybe there's something, there's a lot I don't know about the Lapikas, that's for sure.
Well, a world can also suggest a realm, as in realm of consciousness. And that's how I see the use of the word here. And also, it's more than that, because it becomes hang on, hold it, and you'll see, because coming up in just a moment. Let me see here. Yeah, just in just a little bit, you'll see this described in terms of the world. Okay, just have, it'll become clear in a moment. That's all I have to say about that. And we're about to get into the Lapikas now. Okay?
I guess.
Okay, good. Let's see, where am I? So we know this second world is of the Lapikas, the second 7 from the last verse of the previous stanza. As HPB tells us on page 104, it is the Lapika who project into objectivity from the passive universal mind the ideal plan of the universe, upon which the builders reconstruct the cosmos after every pralaya. So, during the quote-unquote second world, the Lapika reintroduced the blueprints from the previous Manvantara. That's the cycle that existed before, which are then carried into manifestation under the agency of Fohat. This macrocosmic event is mirrored in the macrocosm through the downward extension of the Atman into Atma Buddhi. Thoughts or questions on anything in this paragraph?
Greg's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
So you talk about the Fohat, and I was thinking that, and the objective manifestation emerges out of the monadic or the atmic Buddhic, where the Buddhic plane is the vehicle for the atmic.
Right.
Are you then saying that Fohat creates the form then that we exist in, the form that is consciousness?
That's a good question. It's actually the builders, which is of the Devic kingdom, that are the form creators. Fohat's role is to link spirit in form, so that that form becomes inhabited by spirit.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and
so
that's why it's interesting. That's why, if you look at my cursor, that's why Fohat is considered divine love, because it's the connective principle. It's the power of affinity and sympathy, which connects spirit and form. Okay.
Yeah. So the divas are the enactors. They're the ones
form builders.
Yeah, they're the form builders. Yeah. Okay. That's a lot. That's very helpful. Good. I mean, I've always seen the divas in a different perspective. I mean, we know them as the angels or whatever, but to make them kind of a qualitative, sparky, not qualitative, active energy force that brings the form into manifestation.
That's right. Yeah, and there are great Deva lords who have transcended the Deva kingdom per se, and have merged in their consciousness with the human and even higher kingdoms. And they guide the lesser Devas and elementals into the form building. Okay, and Fohat is the electrical energy. And on every plane, it has a different quality that is appropriate to that plane of existence, right? it becomes effective for binding at whatever plane. And those 7 are called the 7 Fohatic brothers, or the 7 brothers Fohat. Okay, let's see where we are here. Okay, next up. The B section, which references an army of the sons of light stand at each angle, and the Lepika in the middle wheel. They, and an army of the sons of light, by the way, that is the David's Lepikas that we were just talking about, but don't want to get too interpretive yet. They, the Lepika, say, this is good. Could we get a reader for this paragraph, which...
Christine, can you read that for us, please?
I'm getting extra messages here on my screen. Okay, the army, is that it?
Yep.
Okay. The army at each angle is the host of angelic beings, the Dahan Chohans, appointed to guide and watch over each respective region from the beginning to the end of the Manvantara. They are the mystic watchers of the Christian Kabbalists and alchemists, and relate symbolically as well as cosmogenically to the numerical system of the universe. Whoa. The numbers which these celestial beings are connected are extremely difficult to explain, as each number refers to several groups of distinct ideas according to the particular group of angels which it is intended to represent. Herein lies the, I can't see that word, Nophus in the...
Herein lies the notice.
Nophus.
Nodus, N-O-D-U-S.
Oh, notice. In the study of symbology, with which unable to untie by distangling it. So many scholars have preferred dealing with, as Alexander dealt with, the Gordian knot, hence erroneous conceptions and teachings as a direct result. Now, I was reading that just to the left of that, and I got completely confused about the Gordian knot here.
Okay, do you have a question?
Well, I'm just saying, now I can see it if I read it to the left of it, but it's so small on that side. So I apologize for...
Oh, no problem. Yeah, nodus is an extension of the word node, and which is like a nexus.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the heart.
Yeah, in this case, it's referencing that center of symbology. You know, in other words, that, yeah, the heart of the thing. You're right. It does mean that, right? And so what well, we'll get into the interpretation. Any general thoughts or questions about this paragraph before we dive in? Okay, first up, the army at each angle.
And just as you said that, Robert raised his hand.
Go ahead.
Robert?
The phrase stand each angle. It's interesting. I wanted to see what you thought on that one.
Yeah, and we're going to be getting into it big time.
Okay.
So hold on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's deeply significant term. So, okay. So the army at each angle. De Perucker is of the opinion that at each angle refers to the 4 quarters of abstract space. Could we get a reader for this?
Yes, Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
The army at each angle. The four angles are the four quarters, and the middle wheel is the center of space, and that center is everywhere. Because our space is illimitable, the center of it must be wherever the cognizing consciousness is, from Fundamentals of the Etheric Philosophy.
Okay, so fine. But as we learned before, these regions are not locales in 3D space, but rather principles representing levels of consciousness, all manifestations of the central wheel of cosmic ideation, which stands at the center, right? And again, we'll be getting into that. Next, the army at each angle is the host of angelic beings, Dzyan Chohans, appointed to guide and watch over each respective region from the beginning to the end of the Manvantara. So the army is the host of devas under the guidance of some particular Dhyani Chohan, which rules each subplane of the cosmic physical plane. Let's read more about these august beings. Can we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The from the beginning, or
Yeah.
Okay. Dhyani Chohans, from the Sanskrit Dhyani. Contemplation. Tibetan Chohan Lord, lords of meditation. In theosophical literature, Dhyani Buddhists are the intellectual architects, the higher and more spiritual beings of the God world. Dhyani Chohans, as a generalizing term, includes both the higher classes, which take a self-conscious, active part in the architectural ideation of the universe, and the lower classes, some of which are self-conscious, but in their lower representations, progressively less on a descending scale. The lowest of these builders' hosts are little more than conscious or semi-conscious beings following almost servilely the ideation of the cosmic spirit transmitted to them by the higher class of the architects. Dhyani Chohan is likewise synonymous in one sense with the Sanskrit Manu. The 7 principal classes of Dhyani Chohans are intimately connected, each to each, respectively, with the 7 sacred planes of our solar system, and likewise with the globes of the Earth planetary chain. Furthermore, there is a class of Dhyani Chohans at the head of every department of nature in our solar system. These Dhyani Chohans, as the summit of the hierarchy of light, embody in themselves as individuals the ideation of the cosmic logos, thus forming the laws according to which nature exists and works. These laws, therefore, are really the automatic spiritual activities of the highest classes of the Dhyani Chohans. The Dhyani Chohans have their bodhisattvas, intellectual offspring, or representatives on and in each descending cosmic plane, so that every being has at its highest portion one such Dhyani Chohan as its egoic individuality. Hence, the Dhyani Chohans are actually, in one most important sense, our own selves. We were born from them. We were the monads. We were the atoms. The souls projected, sent forth, emanated by the Dhyanis.
Thoughts or questions? The fact that the Dhyani Buddhas are the intellectual architects links them with the Lapika lords, who reinstate and administer the plan through them. There are many.
I have a small question. Just in reading this, Francis, it's probably my thinking. The globes of the Earth planetary chain, I thought that was a horizontal. I thought that one emanated from the other, and then everything else I visualize it's all hierarchical from highest to lowest.
Well, yeah, but they themselves, well, it's a complex subject when you talk about the globes of a chain, because they start at the most tenuous in terms of their elemental composition, right? And they begin with the beings who inhabit it are unconscious and not having developed a monastic principle. And as they move into the material through the second and finally the third, where the fire of mind comes in, then develop the emotion, then the fourth, and the actual ability to use that fire of mind in the fifth, and then group thought in the sixth. You have now turned at the fifth and moved back up in consciousness. So there's a descent from mass consciousness at a high level, elementally speaking, down into density, and then on the return path, the development in consciousness of the beings and the kingdoms within that globe, right? Until you come back to the highest elemental stage, in other words, globe A and globe G having the same elemental composition, but now with highly self-conscious individuals. So it's not just parallel or horizontal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Francis.
Yeah.
Greg has his hand up, but first, Efrosini, she says that the evaluation of the Lapika, this is good. It reminds her of Genesis. After each day in Genesis's creation account, when God made something, the Bible says God saw, and it was good.
Yes. And it's, that's a profound statement. It's like, oh, this is pretty good. This is real good. This is just good. No, that's not it. It means it's appropriate. It's effective. It's successful. It is good, right? All those ideas.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then
I'm glad you brought that forward. That's interesting.
Greg has his hand up. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, I'm not sure if this is a question or a statement. I guess it's more of a combination. The Dhyani Chohans, do they carry both a Davic quality and a Manu quality, in the sense that they're consciousness, yet they're also Davic in nature, so they carry both? I mean, because
Go ahead.
I guess because we, in our soul development and evolutionary process, we're primarily soul evolution process, that we don't have so much Davic quality that we give the word, and then they like as this one statement here, it says where they basically follow the call from the right here in Theosophical literature. Dhyani Buddhists are okay, which one? It was like, the part in the architectural ideation of the universe. So basically, some of them are conscious and unconscious, but they emerge from the call, from those of us that make the call, that make the word, that make the sound come forth. But so do these carry both those qualities? Are they both Manu in one nature with a human consciousness quality, and then in another nature Davic as well?
Yeah, okay. The two kingdoms come together at the sixth initiation. So these highest beings that are described here, both the higher classes, which take a self-conscious active part in the architectural ideation, are fully self-realized beings who are in the role of builders or directing the builders. And those builders are obviously lower classes. Some are self-conscious, and they are in turn, direct the elementals that just blindly do the bidding. So it's an entire system, and at its highest level, it transcends purely Davic consciousness, and takes on, well, really the level of deity, right, in terms of consciousness. So yeah. Okay. Let's see here now. Yeah, there are many types, and this also goes forward to answering your question. There are many types and classes of these beings, from chain lords to hierarchs of kingdoms. I mean, you're talking about deity level beings. But what they all seem to have in common is that they embody some particular divine ideation, some idea that has its origins in the original logoic reality, some part of the plan of manifestation. The respective regions that the Dhyanis are, quote, appointed to guide and watch over, refer to the 7 sacred planets, the chains and globes of our Earth scheme, each kingdom of nature, as well as each cosmic subplane. So there's many different areas that these different types of Dhyanis oversee. HPB addresses the idea put forth in this quote by de Perucker, who says the Dhyani Chohans are actually, in one most important sense, our own selves. And this is how she addresses that. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. Every student of occultism knows that the heavenly bodies are closely related during each Manvantara with the mankind of that special cycle. And there are some who believe that each great character born during that period has, as every other mortal has, only in a far stronger degree, his destiny outlined within this proper constellation or star, traced as a self-prophecy, an anticipated autobiography by the indwelling spirit of that particular star. The human monad in its first beginning is that spirit, or the soul of that star or planet itself. As our sun radiates its light and beams on every body in space within the boundaries of its system, so the regent of every planet star, the parent monad, shoots out from itself the monad of every pilgrim soul born under its house within its own group. The regents are esoterically 7, whether in the Sephiroth, the angels of the presence, the Ishis, does that mean rishis or any
Well, it
the
means
Indian?
anything that you put before Ishi, like
Okay,
that's what it means.
okay, or the Shas,
Suspense.
yeah, them. The one is no number, is said in all the esoteric works.
Okay, we're out of time, folks, and so could we get an announcement for
Right.
times for next time?
The next Secret Doctrine is going to be on July 18th at 7 p.m. And of course, prior to that,
GMT.
yes, prior to that, we'll have the Secret Teaching of All Ages on the 4th of July at 7 p.m. GMT.
Oh, we'll have fireworks of our
Right.
own type, our own type of fireworks.
Right.
Hope you can make that. I hope you're not out busy celebrating. This is a great way to celebrate the 4th of July. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a privilege to host this. I really enjoy it, and thank you all for your participation. Until next time, then. So just a couple of weeks we're looking at, right? Is that right?
Right.
Just a couple of weeks when we'll be doing secret teachings. We're in the middle of Atlantis and our consideration of that. It's a fascinating topic, somewhat different than anything we've looked at before. So I hope to see you there. And until then, bye-bye.
Goodbye, everybody.